Oh, good afternoon. Thanks for stopping by. I am standing here, and I had told you last time we looked at this new copy of The Lord of the Rings, this huge Folio Society edition, that I would have to find a place on my shelves to put this. And the issue is that this is tall enough where when it's standing up, you can't take the books out because they bang against that. So probably have to lay them down like that. I've had this just kind of sitting on the floor over here in the corner, and finally decided to try a couple different things. So doing that, you had asked before, one of these last times you stopped by, you had asked to maybe look at some of the Tolkien books that I have. Some of. This is all of them, I suppose. So I thought I might just kind of walk you through what I have here. You see I'm bringing some others over from another bookshelf and putting all of my Tolkien things together. This historically has been kind of a novel bookshelf. I have something of a organizational method to my library. And this has been novels, and the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien content is pushing everything else out. So why don't we just kind of look at some of these things? So this first one is this single volume edition of the the Lord of the Rings. I got this perhaps 5 years ago. It was shortly after I had moved out of home, where I grew up. What a weird way to say that. But I had bought this. I had always used my mother's. She had a paperback copy of The Lord of the Rings. And I had always used that. And so then I found myself in a place where I needed a copy for my own place. So this is what I bought. And it's a nice single volume edition, of course. And the paper is thin enough where the book is not very thick altogether, and it's kind of a nice size. But the pages themselves don't feel frail or fragile or anything like that. The pages still feel a little thick, so nice quality. Anyway, same thing. I didn't have my own copy of the Silmarillion, and I have always liked this art on this dust wrapper here. So I found a copy of this on the secondary market and bought it, and it's got a really nice end papers where it's the map of Beleriand, and then you go in to the Silmarillion. And there are no illustrations, so it's just a basic copy to have. But again, I needed one at the time. This other gift was this copy was actually a gift from a prior employer. She had gotten this for me for my birthday, and this isn't written by Tolkien, but rather by David Day, and it's his encyclopedia of Tolkien with his illustrations. In this end paper, she has the Balrog and Glorfindel, and then Tuna. Just gorgeous there. And it's really just an encyclopedia. So anything that touches on even the real world mythologies, Greek and Roman mythology, anything Norse mythology that Tolkien pulls from, or anything that comes out in his writings because his imagination is just swimming in these images, it's all in there. So that's a nice resource. It has those really great David Day illustrations. I haven't picked it up very much, honestly, but it is nice to have around. It's a nice copy. A couple non-Middle Earth things. Well, actually, technically, this is still Middle Earth, I guess, but I have Tolkien's The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun, which I got this for Christmas a couple years ago. And, yeah. I don't have really anything else to say about that one, except the fact that it's a great poem. If you haven't read that, it's an excellent poem, and of course, there's a lot of imagery that Tolkien uses from characters like Sigurd, Sigurd and Beowulf. I suppose actually both of them. They're very Númenórean. Aragorn and Sigurd have a lot of comparison. This is Tolkien's Beowulf with a commentary, which is great, and it also has a Selic spell in here, and it has this really excellent dragon. I think this is actually his illustration of Smaug. Maybe I'm wrong. I might be wrong. Yeah, it doesn't say. But Beowulf, if you haven't read Beowulf, I think most of us read it in middle school or high school. I actually didn't read it in either place, surprisingly, but all of my older brothers did. So I don't know what happened with the curricula I was taught, but I hadn't read Beowulf all the way through until after primary and secondary schooling. So now we get into, this was my, and I suppose really is still my workhorse copies of things. So this is the William Morrow copies of The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings. All together in kind of the same format. Of course, you can see the dust jackets are about the same. The Silmarillion has illustrations by Ted Naismith. The other four here, The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, are illustrated by Alan Lee. So that's kind of the difference there. And I still quite like Ted Naismith's illustrations. Try and find one here. So here's this. I think this is Fingolfin as he goes off. But just incredible artwork there by Ted Naismith. So this is a really nice copy. And again, I like it because it matches the rest of these here. This Hobbit one is actually the nicest put together of these four. These ones here it's not quite a cloth binding on them. It's like a hardened paper binding. And then this Hobbit edition is this really nice cloth binding, and it has Smaug on there. The lettering on here is gold rather than, these are kind of orange yellow. So this copy is really quite a bit nicer than these here, but it still matches. So and here's Edgar Ross. And then all of these, of course, you've probably seen these. Again, they're huge. These are pretty big. but I like these illustrated copies this big because you can really look at the illustrations on here. And again, these copies, the paper on this, it's very thick. It's kind of glossy. I know some people don't like the glossy. They prefer a coarser, flat finish. I don't mind the gloss. I like how thick the pages are. It's just a nice sturdy copy. So if I'm off somewhere traveling or on vacation or anything like that, I've taken these copies with me, and they stand up pretty nicely. But you can see here the illustrations on this particular paper are just, I mean, very high quality. So it's a lot of fun to have a nice big copy, because you can just sit here and you don't have to look really closely to appreciate the illustrations there. It's just this nice big copy. It's really for showing off the artwork of the illustrator Alan Lee. And I do like the touch that under the dust wrappers on the Lord of the Rings, they're red. It's this red, like, again, faux cloth binding. It's really like a thick, like, construction paper almost. And that brings us to these, which I've already showed you, but we might take a look at these again. So again, these are much bigger than those ones. And kind of the same logic applies. It's nice that they are so big. It's almost, I would almost like to have, you know, a big book stand, an ambo or something like that, and you just have this, you know, sitting on there, and you can just come up and just read from it. The text is so big. The text is just huge. I wonder if I can find that same illustration. Yeah. Oh, we're close. Yeah, here we go. So again, these have these tipped in illustrations on this separate art paper, and perhaps you can tell, but it is really quite astonishing the quality of the image from this copy here to this. It's really, really baffling just how much clearer, how much crisper. The colors stand out much nicer on this copy, just because they're using, I would assume, superior printing methods, superior paper. I'll show you a couple other things here. But this has these decorative chapter headings. Each one is different, and each custom, again, only to this copy, at least so far, by the illustrator Alan Lee. So just incredible copies. So I'm going to try out a couple days, see if I like those sitting there. They're quite huge, but we'll find somewhere for those. I think one of these next times, you know, I am planning for when you come on September 22nd, that we'll do something and perhaps sit down and read something of The Long Expected Party. But perhaps we ought to sit down one of these times before then and do some preliminary discussions on what you can read beforehand before we jump into The Lord of the Rings this September. Because I think that there are at least two things from the Silmarillion that if you haven't read the Silmarillion and you really want a good understanding of a lot of the ancient callbacks in The Lord of the Rings, you know, when the elves and Frodo, you know, they call on, you know, Elbereth, Gilthoniel, or the the Phial of Galadriel is this light of Erandil. And then also the whole thing with Aragorn, that he's of this long line of Númenorian kings. And in the Lord of the Rings, it's, if you don't know the story already, it can feel like you're a bit detached from that. So perhaps we ought to sit and discuss those two things that you should try and read beforehand, before we meet on September 22nd, to really enjoy that more. So anyway, I'll keep plugging away at this, and we'll try and figure something out, see if we like this setup, and if not, maybe we'll have to do something else. So thank you again for stopping around. It was good to see you, and take care.